simple things. Pixels, buttons, a bit of fun. Then, somewhere along the way, the big platforms moved in. Last year, $200 billion flowed upwards, away from the people who actually play. This year, they take it back. YOM, where players play games straight from your PC, not a data center in Virginia. Meet Tyler Pemberton. Yes, this looks dramatic, but he's perfectly fine. Tyler's offline. His PC isn't. 47 players streaming from his GPU right now. Even AFK, Tyler's rig is pulling its weight. He's making money in his sleep. Maybe this is what happens when gamers finally take control of their own world. Turn your idle GPU into passive income. YOM.net. Eat, sleep, earn, repeat.
Welcome back to the Town Hall. Next topic is about the article released by Magnus.
Hey, is that better? You guys hear me now? I'm watching my chats, and you guys tell me if you hear me or not. I'm gonna look for a thumbs up before I go launch into this again. I would hate to do this whole podcast without being able to be heard. That would suck. How's that? Is that better? Give me a thumbs up. These guys over here. Actually, I guess I can check over here on my own system, can I? Let's bring that up. Yep, very good. No, I'm getting a yep. You were back. Okay, fantastic. All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate you giving me the heads up. That would have been kind of bad. All right, so let me start again. What I was basically saying is, if you catch on the commercial, we allow people who have what turns out to be one of the most valuable resources you might own, and that is your GPU cycles. We help you earn money with your GPU cycles. That when your computer's sitting idle, and like when you go to bed at night, you go off to work, you get a game when you get home, you let us take those GPU cycles and we'll use those on our network to power games for people who don't have a gaming console, don't have a gaming PC. They can play these high-powered AAA quality games in a cloud, just like you have in normal clouds, gaming systems, but it's a lot less expensive and it earns passive income for people who are selling us the GPU cycles. And it's a great way for game developers. You can just put the game on any URL inside of Telegram, inside of Discord. So it drops the friction for user adoption down to the floor, which is, of course, what all the game studios are looking for. I'm going to launch into tonight. I've got an article. Well, I did a report. There's a report that came out from Caladan, and then a response to that report from these folks at Triolith Games. And it's a very interesting topic, back and forth. It's about Web3 gaming. Now, YOM is not built specifically for Web3 games. We are agnostic to that. Any game that is powered by, any executable, we basically can run on our network. We have support for some Web3 supports, but we're going to talk about why this report kind of reflects a little bit onto our own roadmap. But again, we are not Web3 specific for Web3 games. We're open for every game studio, every game developer. But the report is interesting because, we had been saying, or at least I've been saying for years, much of what the response to the report has said. So it was good to hear somebody else's voice saying the same thing I've been saying for a long time. I was involved in some of the early metaverse projects, other Web3 gaming studio projects. And oftentimes we'd have these discussions about how do you use the economics to not turn into a Ponzi scheme, because it's a big deal with Web3 games. So let's get into actually first let's kind of we'll vamp a little bit while we wait for people to get into the stream. And I'm going to go through what I usually do is I try to bring up some of the community images. So if you don't know, Walter is our mascot. He is a rust-colored gorilla wearing a white T-shirt that has a YOM logo, blue jeans, and round blue tinted glasses. So we invite people to create and post their own images of Walter, and then we kind of highlight them here on the podcast. This is one by Gadget B. Nice image there, talking about the YOM TG, which is upcoming. We have a little bit of news on that, but nothing definitive. So if you stop by to find the date for TG, trust me, you're going to know when that date is when we know it. So, but it's not. I don't have the information today. So that was the first one we had today. But my favorite one was this one here. I put it into the timer video. I just think this is really cool. I think they did a great job with getting him in here playing soccer together. And sure, I imagine that Walter would enjoy a good game of soccer, football for most of the world. So those are some Walter images. Let's say hello to everybody. And again, I'll have the chat window up. If you've got questions that are happening, while I'm talking on the subject that I'm on, great. If you have other kinds of questions, go ahead and drop them in there, and I'll try to circle back and hit all the questions in the chats before the stream is over. I do 2 streams. Wednesday night, right now it's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is where I am, East Coast of the U.S., so 4 in the afternoon in California. And then, so that we do that on Wednesdays, and that's generally just an industry wrap up, a little bit of business news about the project. And then on Friday, it's a longer podcast. Generally, we'll have a guest on. That happens at noon Eastern time, but at 6 p.m. Central European time. We have a pretty big contingent in Europe. We are based out of the Amsterdam offices there in Europe. So let's get into. I also wanted to highlight this. Let me put this up here. We released a new article on our blog and on our Medium, so you can go either our blog or to Medium to see the article. But basically, it talks about what's going on with these decentralized cloud gaming systems. So Luna, as I went last week or 2 weeks ago, Amazon Luna is dropping a lot of their AAA titles because they're realizing they can't afford the bandwidth, and that's Amazon who can't afford the bandwidth. And then Microsoft has been scrambling too, trying to find what the right price point is for the subscription service for people to still use and not be upset with Xbox Game Pass. But they're really running into the same problem, and that is the centralized server is just too expensive on its own to host popular games like Call of Duty and Diablo. So Black Knight has been able to get some of those games, but I think even they're going to realize that they're running into the central server as well. And there's a reason to do what we're doing, although it is difficult, and that's why we appear to be the only ones doing it. And that is decentralized in the cloud, using gaming computers on the edge, gaming PCs, and we're rewarding people who are letting us use their GPU cycles when they're not. That kind of system is not easy to set up, so I think everyone's trying to stay away from it. But what we're proving is that it can be done, it can be profitable, and it can save a lot of money. I mean, it's 95% cheaper than running through a central server. And then we don't have the problems of lag that central servers have, because we just find the nearest node to the player and set up the stream that way. So anyways, the article's on our Medium. You can go to, I believe our Medium is, there it is. Just look for YOM on Medium, and we can read the article about why we offer the best solution for people who are or systems that are looking to go to the edge. Let me do a little something here. I'm going to do that and that. All right, let's get into the report for the meat of tonight's show. So, as I say, Caladan released this report. Now, if you don't know who Caladan is, they are a market. They offer many services inside the Web3 space: market making, OTC trading, liquidation. But really, what they are is they're an information broker. And I expect what they did was they went out and to inform their people who get their newsletter and get their services, what should they know about the Web3 gaming space? And it really is kind of brutal when you look at the numbers of where Web3 gaming was at one point, and I had actually shifted my career as just a little personal point to go into Web3 gaming back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, because I thought it held great promise. I like the idea of metaverse projects. I like the idea of people earning money for playing games based on their participation, of the value of attention, because your attention does have value. There's a reason why myself and so many other people got involved in the Web3 gaming space. But as the report talks about 93% of the studios and the projects that were running back in those heydays have gone dormant. They're not operating any longer. So that sounds like a huge number. But again, keep in mind, and again, knowing that coming from the traditional gaming space, in traditional gaming, it's not really that much better. You might have about 10% of the projects that actually survive or more than a year. Most projects in traditional gaming also have a not strong track record. It is a difficult world to get into. Gaming is, and getting even more so. I've gone through several different reports from Matthew Ball about the state of the gaming industry, and I've got a lot of friends who are in the gaming industry who are jumping from studio to studio. There's layoffs happening all the time. Gaming is now competing for people's attention with things like Snapchat and TikTok and all those other things that are grabbing people's attention. So people are not, the gaming industry itself is contracting because of the amount of competition in the space for your attention, which is again why we say, one of YOM's main goals is to make the onboarding as frictionless as possible, make it as simple as clicking on a web browser. Anyways, so those numbers are pretty. The report is fairly lengthy. I'm not going to go through the whole report, but it does paint a pretty grim picture, and it does have some pretty. I mean, I'm going to agree with Magnus here as his report. So Magnus Soderberg, who is from Triolith Games, he responded, and this is actually how I even found the Caladan report. It escaped my notice until he pointed out that the report itself is not complete. It's got some. He agrees with much of it, but then he talks about why they missed the important lessons that should be learned. Really, I think what he was basically saying I'm going to sum it up at the very beginning. We shouldn't ignore this report, and we can't ignore those numbers. But what you get from this information does not have to be that Web3 gaming is dead and never coming back, which is what, by the way, the woman who runs Solana has said. She said Web3 gaming is dead, never coming back. And again, I think this is another reason why we've jumped to Avalanche as our blockchain, because we could see that Solana was not really. They're not optimistic. They're putting their efforts behind things like meme coins, which didn't make sense to us because we know there's a business case for using blockchain to support the gaming industry. So, anyways, it's not what Magnus is saying again is Web3 gaming is not dead, but the token first era is. And again, this kind of mimics much of what I was saying for much of the past few years. So let's go into what he's talking about in his report. And I want to bring up my notes so I don't miss the important pieces. Again, if you don't know who Triolith Games are, they are a company. They provide Triolith Games provide an infrastructure support for those studios who want to get into use Web3 for their gaming, but don't want to become experts in it. It's a whole other understanding, a whole other education that you need to do to understand putting Web3 into your games. So they have a vested interest in making sure people realize that Web3 gaming can still happen. So let's keep that in mind, that Magnus has got a point of view because he's built a lot of technology that supports the concept of the Web3 gaming. But I don't think that colors it to the point his essay to the point that I don't believe what he's saying. I think what he's saying has a lot of validity. So what happened, right? You had a whole bunch of projects get launched in the heyday, right, where people were earning money from playing games, and then the investors started jumping in, and then the studio started saying, okay, well we can start doing things like NFT sales and land sales and token sales as a way to bring in money to the studio while they started development or while they started doing development. But in many cases, they were leading with the economic system structure. They were talking about how important the economy was going to be, and I actually got involved in some of those economic models. I think I designed a pretty solid model that had the metaverse launch, it would have done really well. But without a core game loop, which is, again, Magnus's key point, is without a game that's fun to play, you can have the best economic system in the world, but then no one's showing up to actually use it, or very few people are. So the damage is it hits a lot of different places. You know, in traditional games, when a traditional game studio has a loss, it hits investors and hits publishers and hits the developers. With Web3 gaming, as Magnus says, the blast radius is so much wider, because now all of a sudden the gamers themselves are taking the damage, because they were joining not just for the gaming. Many of them were joining for the speculation of earning money based on their gameplay, or by speculating on the NFTs or the token itself. Right. And so it's damaging when all these studios, all these different projects had to shut down. All those players who came in were also taking the hit. They were basically taking the place of some of the investors, although, again, investors were getting involved in the whole space as well. So, again, I think that I want to agree with Magnus in much of what he's saying here, that the core difference is that they in the Web3 gaming space, they were doing the financialization long before they were coming up with a core game loop. And if you have been in the gaming space, and I imagine everybody here plays games, you realize that it's really about the core game loop. And that core game loop can be the same action just over and over again with different flavors to it that can be fun and engaging. I think Axie Infinity, when that first launched, it had a pretty solid both game loop and financial system, but they I think they quickly kind of scaled so fast that they turned into what amounted to a Ponzi scheme, where they had to bring in more players in order to keep that economy going. So you had these studios that sprung up from game developers, or people who had a good understanding of game development, but didn't necessarily understand the economics, right? So they built a good, fun game with some economics tied to it, but didn't understand the economics was eventually going to kill them. Then you had other studios that popped up, or other projects that popped up, that had a really strong understanding of the economic model, but didn't necessarily understand where the gaming aspect, or how to make the fun game, or in many cases, how to keep a schedule. So many of those projects were well-meaning, and they had grand visions for these massive metaverse spaces, but realizing that never realizing a schedule, kept on adding in more features, and had feature creep, and never shipped any. Some of them would ship a small little segment of the game, like the racing part of the game, or the first-person shooter part of the game, because those are easy to release. And people thought, well, if we can put that out there, we can prove that we're actually doing some part of the build. But again, it was kind of a little bit too little, too late for many of those projects. You have some exceptions, and I think that we should talk about the exceptions. Like Off the Grid is a fantastic game. It's a lot of fun to play. I think it is suffering from the same thing that many game studios are suffering from right now, and that is the lack of attention just in the market. The ability to peel people away from the games that they're currently playing to try a new title, as good as the title is. And again, I think Off the Grid's a great looking title. It's a lot of fun. They've done a lot of things well, and they kept the blockchain very quiet in the background. So it's not like it's invasive. It's not something that people are going there to grind and then throwing the economy off, which is, of course, another issue that these kind of games can have. But it's really just suffering from the fact that there are a lot of games out there that are very good right now, and it's difficult to gain attention from away from the games that people are already kind of invested in when they're invested in a first-person shooter already. So I think that Magnus is right to point out that there's a lot that worked in that system. Again, I don't think you can pin the difficulties that game is having on the blockchain stuff. It's really, I think, more emblematic of the entirety of the gaming space. I thought that Magnus did a really good job, and obviously he's a guy who understands gaming really well. But the questions that I think that a lot of these studios did not keep in mind when they started making their games or their economy were the questions like this: like, why do players stay? What do they consume? What do they value? What's important to them? How do they create status? Which is more important than people understand when they're doing game design. It really is a lot about how much can I brag about what I've done. Is the win moment one that is quiet and only to myself? It's just not good enough. Oftentimes, the win moment has to be something that you can broadcast and shout out about, because that's what brings in other players to try to dethrone the person who is shouting and talking about their win. So, what creates status? What removes resources from the economy? So a good economic system inside of a game, or actually in any economic system, there are what we call faucets and sinks. There are ways to put financial instruments into circulation, and there are ways to draw those instruments out of circulation. That without an understanding of why that's important and having a constant vigilance on watching the ebbs and flows, you'll get too much out there, which of course inflates the amount in circulation, which of course brings the value down because there's more of them, they're less valuable. Or if you can't get them circulating enough, you can't get them passing through hands fast enough, that's another issue that causes economic systems to falter. So understanding that, like what removes resources from the economy, what helps those resources, that economy, circulate? That's another question. He doesn't include it here, but I would include that in my list of questions that a good sustainable game economy should ask. And what makes the session worth playing when the token price is flat? And I think that was one of the bigger ones that these projects suffered through, whereas they would have what they thought was a great game economy, and perhaps it was. But if people didn't have a reason to come back and keep playing when as the economy started to slow, then the tank was the spiral goes downward, and that's where these projects kind of ended up. He has a whole section here about metaverses, and again, that's where I had come from before I was in YOM. I was in one of the metaverse projects, and again, I think we designed a really solid two currency economic system that would allow for people who had money to spend would be able to purchase certain financial instruments inside the game, and then people who had time to spend, because those are the two things that are where value is accumulated in the time you spend, and then the fiat that you can bring into a economy. And so the system was worked out that way. Anyways, it had all the other problems that a game studio has, where not able to keep a schedule, not able to launch any small pieces of the game. Even they had, before I was involved, they had done things like land sales and NFT sales, and those things are very difficult to capitalize on when you're still struggling just to put the game together. So lessons are learned. And again, I think that actually, before I jump there, let me go into the last section that Magnus brings up, and that is regulation. So a lot of the projects and a lot of the industry just kind of closed their eyes and said, well, regulation's not happening, so we can do what we want to do. I think that was, and I agree with them, it was dangerous and short-sighted, because eventually the regulations did come into play, and right now it's got a lot of people scared because they don't understand them. So teaming up with folks who understand what they're doing, as I would advise that if you're thinking about getting into the Web3 gaming space. But the regulations are also, they were going to hamper, and people who just turn a blind eye. Now that MiCA is fully enforced in Europe and getting even more restricted in July, I think that's when the final door gets closed. Those systems are going to have even more problems if they're not taking into account the regulations that were bound to happen anyways, right? So his lessons learned, and my lesson, what I've been saying for years, and that is that you got to lead with the gameplay. The gameplay has to be fun, and then you have to outsource the pieces that you don't understand, or bring in smart people for the pieces that you don't understand, and economies and economic systems, and now regulations as well. All those pieces are they can make for a great gaming network, a great gaming infrastructure, a great gaming universe. And we can see it right with Roblox as an example of one that's working well. Now they're using fiat, and not everyone can get money out of the system. It's really restricted to only those developers who are working in their system, which I think is going to expand in the future. There's going to come someone will come along and create a system that is as robust as what they have in Roblox, but enables more people than just those few developers to earn money back out from the attention that they're spending in the game. So that system does work. There is value in these economic in game that have economies that can transfer in and out of the game world, but hasn't been done correctly yet. And there are still people who are suffering through the losses that they took in the first cycle. And again, I think I agree. I'm going to agree with Magnus that there are certainly lessons to be learned in this first cycle, things to not do again, and reasons to be cautious if you're getting into that field. But just to throw the baby out with the bathwater and to say that it's never going to happen again, I think is incorrect. I think that that flies in the face of what we understand technology always does. Technology always kind of ebbs and flows, and when there are new technology, people take advantage of it, and then those people go away, and then the people who learn lessons from the people who took advantage of it come into the space and start doing it. They start doing it correctly, and I think that's what you're going to see in the next wave. Anyways, that is one. I'm going to put the links to much of what was said tonight into the YouTube video description, so you can see what I'm talking about here. You'll get links to all these articles. But again, I think I'm going to just end my talk about this just to agree with Magnus to say that it is not dead. There's not a funeral for Web3. We should not think that blockchain gaming is going to go away. It's certainly going to evolve. It's certainly going to get better. There's work to be done, but the technology will always improve, and there's a demand for it. Absolutely. In the meantime, what you can still do if passive income, if gaming was the way you were looking at a passive income, there's still a way to do it, and that is us, right? Like if you have a gaming rig at home and you want to help the gaming industry thrive and expand and reach more players, if you have seen and believe in the promise of cloud gaming, which we certainly do, but realize that the centralized model is never going to scale to the level that it has to, I invite you to check out YOM. If you haven't, we have again, we put nodes out into the ecosystem. We just launched V2 has gone on to, I think it's almost on all the nodes at this point. So version 2 is optimized. We went through it last week with Ron, our CTO, but it's more optimized. It's got a greater reach. We're stacking it full of games. If you want to be part of that system to earn income, those nodes are now available for sale. They've been available for sale for a little while, but they're limited numbers of them that are going out. That is with our partners at freshminers.com. So if you go to freshminers.com and search for YOM, you'll find our hardware there to purchase. But before you do that, what we advise everyone to do is we've made an app. It's a rig checker app. And what you do is you run that app on the system that you're planning to put onto our network to earn passive income. It'll give you an estimate about how much you could be earning per month based on the input that you put in and based on your gaming rig. Do that first before you decide to purchase. We don't want people to go off and purchase and then find out they can't run and they send it back to us and they're feeling burnt. So we build a rig check. It's more robust now. Even if you've run this rig check in the past, we've released a second version of that as well. That's more robust. It's got better measuring. So if you were told from the first rig check that your system couldn't support it, our advice is to go ahead and run it a second time with this new rig check and see if that hasn't the improved system doesn't allow for your rig to also work on our network. We've got partnerships with some big names that we're going to be announcing pretty soon. We've got TG coming up in the next month or less. I actually don't have a date yet. I can't give you a date as to when that TG is going to happen, but trust us when we know we're going to be broadcasting it from the rooftops. All right, I've got a few more minutes of people. If you tuned in like 2 weeks ago, my hockey team is in the finals, and today is game 6. We're down 3-2. It's the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that game starts up. It's actually starting right now. So I'm going to, just another reason to jump off. But I will spend some time. If people have questions, I'll take a few more questions before I jump off. If not, I'm going to go hit that game and make sure that my boys make it to game 7. And if you don't watch hockey, all I can say is there is really nothing better than a game 7 hockey game in a playoff because it is intense. Game 6, we got to get through game 6 before we set our eyes on game 7. All right. Not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and dump out. I appreciate everyone tuning in. If you have interest in learning more about us, please check us out at yom.net. I am going to be broadcasting again on Friday at noon Eastern, 6 p.m. Central European time, and we will have a guest then. And we're going to talk about our community's season 2. It's the quest system is starting on Friday, so that is going to launch. We've checked. I think we've done our final checks on the system, so you're going to see that starting up on Friday. We'll talk more about that then. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next. We'll see you in 2 days. Cheers. Oh, I keep on forgetting to say. I don't forget to say, but my sign off is to be good to yourself, drink lots of water, be good to someone around you, give them a hug, let them know that you love them, and we'll tune in.